Welcome guys, John's Football Channel. This is your post review to PSG 1, Arsenal 1. They ended up finishing 4-3 on penalties. Let's get into this post review. Let's starting up with the lineups. So what happened in the lineups, we're looking at obviously they went with Mustafa in goal, Hakimi, Marquinhos, Paco and Mendes in the defense, and then Neves, Vitinha and Fabian Ruiz as the midfield, and then Doué, Dembele and Kvaratskhelia up front for PSG. And then if we look at Arsenal, they went with David Raya in goal, Hikakipe as the left back, Gabriel and Saliba as the centre backs, and then Mosquera as the right back. And then in midfield, they went with Lewis Kelly, Declan Rice, Trossard, Odegaard and Bukayo Saka, and then Kai Havertz up front. And then it was very interesting to see that they actually stuck with Lewis Kelly. They could have easily brought on the likes of probably Marino or Eze. They could have played Eze easily. They could have probably dropped Trossard into that midfield a little bit more deeper, and then played Eze on one of the wings. But no, they actually trusted Lewis Kelly. So it was good to see. Lewis Kelly actually had a decent job. He didn't do much wrong or anything like that. There was a question of him. I think it was him where there was one chance where he had a tackle that he probably accidentally mistimed. But apart from that, he was able to stay on his feet and actually orchestrate the play quite well in terms of what the things that he had to do for his team. And then if you take a look, obviously, at exactly as to how the game unfolded, it was from the get-go, both teams, I think more from Arsenal. Arsenal were shaping up in terms of attacking as a unit and defending as a unit, whereas PSG, for some reason, in the last couple of games that they played, they didn't exactly play like that. They actually played as a coherent side. But going into this game, they decided to stick to zonal marking and zonal attacking kind of style. They left like the likes of Dembele and Doué on the wings. They left stretching the play quite well. But it ended up meaning that if they lost the ball in the midfield, they were on the back foot and trying to recuperate the ball. And I think that's where Arsenal actually were shining in the first half. They're actually doing that quite well. They're actually going on maybe 2v1 on the wingers and the midfielders as well. And I think that's why they were winning in the first half quite easily. Obviously, Kai Havertz ended up scoring the first goal quite early in the 6 minutes. I think it was one of the midfielders or the defender ends up playing it against Trossard, and then the ball ends up going down the flank with the likes of Kai Havertz running on goal, and then Kai Havertz ends up slotting it into the roof of the net and making it 1-0 for Arsenal. And then if you look in the second half, obviously it was the likes of Arsenal trying to drop down at the tempo, trying to delay the game. That's where you end up seeing Mosquera as getting a yellow card for time wasting. And then Bukayo Saka as well ends up getting a yellow card. I think trying to get to ensure that the PSG don't get on a counter attack. And I think that's that kind of mentality can hurt you if you play too early. I think it's a double-edged sword for Arsenal. The fact that they scored too early, it gave them the opportunity not sure quite what to do in terms of do we defend or do we go. But I think they obviously should have actually went for it a bit because they knew they were doing quite well in the first half. They should have stayed with it and actually get the second, give themselves an opportunity to have protection, some form of in case they score, we know that we are still fine. And they didn't do that, and I think hence why they got punished in this game. They ended up conceding, and then now it was a case of PSG were also hungry. Once they scored, they actually felt like they actually can do something. And then time ends up clicking out. The teams were probably fatigued with all the running, and I think that's where we end up going into the second phase where we're going into extra time. And I think that's where we end up seeing the likes of Hikakipe ends up being fatigued. He ends up pulling his hamstring, and they basically couldn't play an extra player from the bench because they already used all their subs. And they're basically playing with 10 men basically for the rest of the game, going into the 120 minutes. I think PSG could have done a bit more better going into that position. They were actually just, I suppose, they didn't also have an engine. They didn't actually have strikers to move around and actually open the play. But I think they had a bit enough to actually hurt Arsenal when they had a chance. They just didn't do so. It is a question that they should have found some way, especially the players that came off or came on in the later stages of the game. They should have had the firepower to actually lead the line and actually go and get the goal, to not worry about penalties. But luckily for PSG, they ended up stepping up and going into penalties. And I was quite worried knowing that Arsenal have a decent goalkeeper in terms of saves and penalties as well, and they have a decent team in terms of taking penalties as well. So I wasn't quite sure where it was gonna go, but likely with the penalties, we'll end up seeing. I believe it was did well as well with his penalty. Declan Rice did well as well. There was a few penalties that did quite well, likes of Ramos as well, taking the first penalty for PSG. Lands up putting in the top corner. Then I know that straight after that, it was Mendes for PSG. Lands up missing straight after, which was quite, I don't know, how could you possibly miss? You have the most confidence to actually score now because you know the pressure's off you. You should be able to do a job. But PSG, luckily, they had that safety net to continue into the next phase of the penalties, and then we'll end up seeing. I think PSG ends up taking another penalty. They'll end up leading the penalties on the night, and then we'll end up seeing Gabriel step up for the last penalty for Arsenal. And from that minute, I already knew Gabriel wasn't the best player to actually have to take the last penalty. I could clearly see that this guy was going to miss it. The likes of there's some certain players who have a hardness about them, and Gabriel definitely does have that as well. He's very stiff, and I clearly see that something was going to go wrong because of the player who he is, and I think that's it. It sums it all up. Clearly, Arsenal could have went and took the kill from the get-go, from the early match of the game, and they didn't do so, and now they were actually punished at the end of the game with Gabriel missing the final penalty on the night, and allowing PSG to go and win this game. And then if we look at obviously some stats, obviously can clearly see PSG dominating everything. Total shots, they dominated. The shots on target dominated. Touches in opposition box dominated. Big chances dominated. Fouls. Okay, they dominated at least amount of fouls. Corners as well. I think PSG were quite poor with their corners. They kept going with the outswinger, and I think it obviously makes it more difficult for PSG's player to actually go and head it into the goals. But apart from that, they end up doing the job. They end up coming back from behind and actually getting the win. So very well done from them. They end up doing the job, staying focused, and I was quite surprised that Arsenal ended up getting the luck in terms of getting the first goal, and they didn't actually want to capitalize and actually get the second. It was quite surprising from that perspective. Yeah, so it was actually good that PSG ended up winning on the night. Obviously, none of us Chelsea fans would have wanted Arsenal to win, and it was good that they didn't on the night. So apart from that, nice one from us. We end up staying as Champions League finalists and winners of twice times. So it was good that Arsenal didn't get a chance to actually have a number on us and actually say no, they've won the Premier League and the Champions League on the same season. So at least they get to keep chasing for the Champions League final and win. But anyway, guys, very, very, very well done from PSG. Let them staying into it and actually winning the penalties on the night. Let me know down below what you guys think of this game. How do you see this game going? What are your thoughts on this game? Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and peace.